Jim Rickards' economic predictions for 2023. According to Jim Rickards, the global economy is running on fumes and on the way to total collapse, and the old patchwork solutions by central banks will not work. In his no-nonsense analysis in the book Sold Out, How Broken Supply Chains, Surging Inflation, and Political Instability Will Sink the Global Economy, he presents a looming global monetary system doomsday. This leads us to wonder, why did he come to such conclusions? One of the solutions he emphasizes for the upcoming total global economic collapse, and more importantly, is he right, wrong, or more about fiction than reality? Who is Jim Rickards? Not taking Jim Rickards seriously would prove to be futile, because he does advise the U.S. government, U.S. Army, and CIA on national and international economic and financial issues that affect America's domestic decision-making process and geopolitical mobilization across the globe. James Rickards is the editor of the financial newsletter Strategic Intelligence. He is also the author of Wall Street Journal and national bestseller Aftermath, 4 New York Times bestsellers, The Road to Ruin, The Death of Money, Currency Wars, and Sold Out, in addition to the national bestseller, The New Case for Gold. His professional portfolio as an investment advisor, consultant, lawyer, and economist is quite impressive and enviable. Why so gloomy? Jim Rickards' analysis and predictions do not contradict those of numerous other economic, political, and financial experts from around the world. However, in many instances, he does go a step further than others and has a rather unique way of connecting the dots and producing predictions. His analysis of the state of the U.S. and global economy and the direction in which they are heading is realistic, but not set in stone. Indeed, since the emergence of COVID, the global economy has been transformed into something entirely different. One of the main factors in this transformation, as Rickards states, is a massive global crisis in supply chains. The effects were global, from the farmer who became unable to buy fertilizers and get workers on the farm to factories shutting down, because workers became unable to reach work while raw materials sat idle in the mines and miners' warehouses. The immediate result was an increase in prices. However, that alone was not sufficient enough to lead to an out-of-control inflation. Other factors had to come into play, most notably the government's money-printing policies and near-zero interest rates. Meanwhile, the dominant psychological state among the masses and corporate CEOs became more and more reliant on government rescue operations. In China, the situation escalated to the point where massive corporations almost sent the country into bankruptcy. Who can forget the Evergrande fiasco? A company worth more than $300 billion became unable to pay a couple of $100 million of interest to its bondholders every few months. Why? Well, the geniuses at the helm of Evergrande thought the Communist Party would come running to their rescue. Little did they know that their leadership was looking for someone to make an example of, so other mega Chinese corporations would stop being corporate welfare bums. In the USA, Elon Musk would openly say that Tesla stocks are overvalued, yet the more he said it, the more people bought it and caused it to rise even more. People even stopped saving for a rainy day and began investing in fictitious stocks called cryptocurrencies, which at one point had a market capitalization of about $3 trillion, and somehow magically become worth a few $100 billion in less than 16 months. The unjustified madness of soaring stock prices in 2021 resulted in far too many busts for retail investors. At some point in 2021, the whales of Wall Street observed a massive surge in retail investors, yet these inexperienced investors vanished just as fast as they appeared right after the market began to play at games with the masses in the first quarter of 2022. For far too many of these retail investors, everything was lost, including savings and borrowed money. Rickards even believes that the current problem actually started in 2007, when the annual growth rate went below the average of 3.5%, and remained around 2% since then. He even goes as far as saying that we have been in a state of economic depression since then because the GDP growth rate is actually low and thus is a depressed rate. He does make a good point, however. Most economists would not call it a depression, since it can more accurately be described as weak economic expansion. This fact, coupled with a real present and dangerous evolving bad debt crisis, still untamed inflation, low personal savings rates, an unresolved supply chain crisis, and geopolitical instability due to the Ukraine crisis, has pushed central banks to undertake double measures to bring the economy back to normal, where inflation is around 2%, interest rate around 6%, and the balance sheet is just that, balanced. However, as Rickards puts it in plain words, These solutions actually create a recession that would force the same central banks to reduce interest rates and increase money printing. And thus, it is a strategy that is bound to fail. Some experts strongly disagree with Rickards on this matter and point out that this strategy works especially if it is coupled with serious government spending on infrastructure projects that creates millions of jobs. There is a trick here. If a recession hits sometime in 2023, the government must decrease the interest rate by 4 points to deal with it. But as of right now, there is simply no space for such a reduction, and the balance sheet does not exactly allow for more money printing. Rickards believes that the government will simply be unable to lower the interest rate or print money, either since that will fuel inflation, which is still above the accepted rate. As a solution, Rickards puts emphasis on the International Monetary Fund because it is the only non-governmental organization able to print money. The IMF does have its own money printing machine, and its currency is called SDR, which stands for Special Drawing Rights. The SDR is an international reserve asset, created by the IMF in 1969 to supplement its member countries' official reserves. To date, a total of 661 billion SDR, equivalent to about $943 billion, have been allocated. Here is an interesting fact. The IMF did print about 456 billion SDRs recently in response to the COVID pandemic. However, these newly minted SDRs did not make any difference to nations that needed them the most. Additionally, the SDR is not backed by anything, not gold or any other type of asset. It is like a fictitious currency that simply makes the USA, the EU, the UK, Japan, and China more comfortable, and their prospective currencies a foundation for the global forex markets. It also gives them more power as contributors to the IMF loan-sharing funds. The USA, UK, Japan, and EU have been working as a bloc to dictate what the IMF is and is not. Please forget the rosy image portrayed by the IMF and its fancy words and reports on its website. It is a loan sharking racket, and its masters do not care if borrowing nations pay back or not. They care more about how and where the money these borrowers spend, and on making sure that they lose and become puppets in their pockets. The IMF is still a coercing force that serves the West's neo-colonialist, imperialist agenda. The IMF is not a charity, and every single country that fell into its trap had or still has to endure immense suffering, while footing some serious concessions to please the USA and the EU in particular. At its core, the IMF acts as a middleman. Some would go as far as describing it as a racketeering syndicate, because it dictates who is allowed to access its funds and who is not, based on complex criteria that entail conditions on how and where the money will be spent. Most of the world's countries do not even like the IMF. They see it as an extension of the American and West European agenda of global hegemony through what can only be described as loan sharking, because if you do not pay the IMF their money back plus interest, a nation is immediately downgraded and soft sanctions are imposed on its government and banking institutions. The IMF has been described as an extension of America's and West Europe's agenda of reaping the most benefits from the global economy. Take Argentina, for example. It is experiencing a massive economic crisis and political deadlock, and it is being blackballed by the IMF and its unofficial owners, the USA and the UK in particular, because it is unable to pay back about $50 billion of debt to the IMF. Now Argentina has been downgraded and also lost access to important international lenders and is becoming more and more isolated. However, it is being kept afloat by China, which has expressed willingness to aid it. In conclusion, as much as Rickards' economic analysis seems to be sound, he believes U.S. dollar domination will be challenged by China and Russia, and a multipolar global monetary system will emerge in the future. But the world will witness a massive economic downturn in the nearest years. What are your thoughts on this? Please let us know in the comments below. And do not forget to subscribe to our channel to see more of interesting videos. See you soon.